They say Chicago is built on forgotten history. Some of that history is buried deeper than others. Welcome to Ebon Station, a place not found on any city map, where the trains don't just run on time. They run on something else entirely. My name is Marcus Tate, a maintenance worker trying to outrun his own ghosts. But I found myself in a place of steel and shadows, given 3 strange rules just to stay alive. What's the creepiest abandoned place you've ever explored? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to descend into Ebon Station, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because down here, the schedules are absolute. The final departure is boarding now. I used to tell myself the piercing shriek of train wheels on steel was the sound of progress, the sound of Chicago breathing. That was before the derailment, before that same sound became the punctuation mark at the end of my wife Sarah's life, and before I started hearing her whisper my name in the hollow echo of every passing freight car. Now I'm here, standing at the rusted gates of Ebon Station, a place officially bulldozed from city maps since a mass disappearance in '79, hired by a man with a scarred face and a fat roll of cash to find out what happened to the last poor bastard he sent down here. I'll be agent Iris, and I would eat him trouble. That's after she said. The air in this subterranean mausoleum is thick with the smell of decay, stagnant water, and burnt ozone. And the only welcome I got was a greasy handwritten note left on a workbench. Don't board trains without numbers on the departure board. If the station bell rings 3 times, place an iron bar on the nearest track. When you hear train whistles from abandoned tunnels, a ghost train is arriving. My missing colleague, Caleb Dunn, was a stickler for rules, but I found his primary toolbox near an unnumbered platform, its contents scattered as if he'd left in a soul-tearing hurry, or been dragged away. The job was simple, the man with the scar had said. Get in, restore power to the auxiliary systems for a structural survey, and find out why Caleb stopped answering his phone. The cash was good enough to keep the bank from foreclosing on the empty house Sarah and I once called home. A house now haunted by a silence far louder than any ghost train. I descended the main staircase, my heavy work boots echoing in the cavernous space. Ebon Station was a cathedral of decay. Grand archways were choked with cobwebs. Ornate brass fixtures were coated in a verdigris shroud, and the floor was a mosaic of cracked tiles and century-old grime. The silence was a physical entity, so profound that the drip of water from the vaulted ceiling sounded like a gunshot. My first task, the secondary generator in sublevel B. The schematics were old, brittle things that crackled in my hands. The generator room was a cage of rusted machinery and gargantuan switches that looked like they belonged in Frankenstein's laboratory. With a groaning shudder of protest, I threw the main breaker. The station didn't roar to life. It awoke with a low, sick hum. A few emergency lights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like hanged men. And then high above the main concourse, the old Solari split-flap departure board began to chatter. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was a frantic mechanical heartbeat in the dead silence. Letters and numbers spun in a dizzying random cascade of forgotten destinations. Cincinnati, St. Louis, Omaha, before the entire board went dark, save for one track. Track 9. Its destination board didn't list a city. It displayed a single, chilling word, elsewhere. A cold knot tightened in my gut. I looked at the station blueprints spread out on a dusty bench. Track 9 ran straight into a section of tunnel clearly marked with a red ink note from a long-dead city engineer. Tunnel 3? Collapsed 1928. Unstable? Do not enter. And from the absolute rock-sealed darkness of that very tunnel, a low, mournful train whistle echoed, a sound that vibrated through the concrete floor and up into my bones. It was a sound I knew too well, A phantom cry that tore open old wounds. The first rule. The third rule. They weren't jokes. They were a syllabus for a curriculum of horror. The whistle faded, leaving a silence that felt heavier, more watchful than before. I tried to rationalize it. Air pressure changes in the old tunnels. A trick of acoustics, but my heart hammered a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs, refusing to listen to reason. I turned my attention back to the job, focusing on the tangible, the mechanical. Find Caleb. That was the mission. I started my search in the maintenance corridors, a labyrinth of damp concrete and weeping pipes. That's where I found it. Tucked away in a rusted maintenance locker, beneath a pile of moldy rags, was a smartphone. Caleb's. The screen was cracked, but the battery had a sliver of life left. I powered it on. The only things on it were audio files, a series of frantic, personal logs. Log 1, Caleb's voice, tinny and strained, crackled from the small speaker. Made it in. Place gives me the creeps, but the money's good. First task is the generator. Easy peasy. His voice was confident then. I scrolled forward. Log 4. Power's on. But the board's acting up. Listed a train on track 9. That's impossible. It's a deadline. His voice was less steady now. Log 7, he was whispering now, the sound of his own ragged breathing loud in the recording. A train just arrived. On track 9. No lights, no driver. Just rolled in. The doors opened. I saw people inside, just sitting there, staring out. God, I gotta get out of here. As if on cue, a new sound echoed through the station. Not a whistle, but a low, grinding rumble. I crept to the edge of the main concourse, peering down at the tracks. On track 9, the one leading to nowhere, a train was gliding out of the darkness of the collapsed tunnel. It was a relic, a spectral, rust-eaten passenger train from the 1940s. Its windows were dark, grimy voids. It moved with an unnatural silence. No click-clack of wheels, no screech of brakes. It simply arrived, stopping perfectly at the platform marked elsewhere. It had no identifying numbers on its chassis, no logos, nothing. A numberless train, with a soft, pneumatic sigh that sounded like a dying breath. The doors slid open. The interior was dimly lit by a faint, gray luminescence. And Caleb was right. It was full of passengers. The passengers. They sat perfectly still. Men in old-fashioned hats, women with ghostly veils, all staring forward unblinking. As I watched, one of them, a woman in a tattered blue dress, slowly turned her head. Her face was indistinct, a pale smudge in the gloom, but her movements were horribly, unnervingly deliberate. She looked directly at me, and she beckoned. For a terrifying, irrational moment, I felt a pull. A deep, resonant grief echoing in my chest. She looked, in the dim, deceiving light, a little like Sarah. The urge to walk towards the open door to join her was a physical weight, a siren song of sorrow. I broke eye contact, my heart pounding, and stumbled back into the shadows of the corridor. As I did, the final audio log on Caleb's phone chose that moment to play. His voice a panicked, static-laced whisper. The signals, the power surges. They're not ghosts. They're not random. Someone is controlling them. From inside the station. Caleb's last words shifted everything. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a curated event. Someone was the puppet master. I was no longer just a survivor. I was an investigator in a crime scene where the laws of physics were optional. Optional. I began to hunt for the operator, not the ghosts. My engineering knowledge was my only weapon. I followed the power conduits, searching for anomalies, and I found them. Tucked behind a rusted access panel was a bundle of modern, shielded Ethernet cables, starkly new against the crumbling, cloth-wrapped wiring of the 1920s. They snaked off into the deeper, more derelict parts of the station. Someone had jury-rigged a modern network into this corpse of a building. As I was tracing the cables, a new sound shattered the silence. Clang. It was a deep, resonant toll, so powerful it vibrated through my bones and made my teeth ache. An old, cast-iron station bell high on the concourse wall, a bell that shouldn't have been able to ring, swung ponderously. Clang. My eyes darted to the note with the rules, which I'd shoved in my pocket. If the station bell rings 3 times, clang. The third toll echoed, seeming to suck the very air from the station, replacing it with a palpable, predatory cold. Panic seized me. Place an iron bar on the nearest track. I looked around wildly. My eyes landed on a heavy 4-foot iron pry bar leaning against a support column. I grabbed it, its weight a solid, reassuring thing in my trembling hands. I sprinted to the edge of the nearest platform, track 4, and with a grunt of effort, laid the heavy bar across the 2 rails. The moment the iron completed the circuit, Caleb's disembodied voice, a ghostly echo from a nearby power speaker I hadn't even realized was active, crackled through the air. The iron doesn't stop the train, Marcus. It grounds the hunger. As he spoke, a wave of immense, invisible pressure washed through the station. The iron bar I'd just placed began to glow. First a dull cherry red, then a brighter orange, as if it were absorbing an immense, unseen energy, a strange, intricate sigil, like a stylized train wheel crossed with a star, burned itself onto the rusted surface of the rails where the bar made contact. The oppressive cold receded, and the air felt, for a moment, clean, normal. My hands were shaking. I took a photo of the sigil with my phone and sent it, along with a frantic, rambling text about the station's history, to the one person I knew who might be able to make sense of this madness, Dr. Elise Monroe, my strange friend, a forensic psychologist who owed me a favor. Her reply came back almost instantly. Marcus, where are you? That sigil is from 19th century spiritualist folklore. It's not for summoning. It's for containment. Stay put. I'm looking into something. Elise's message was a confirmation of my worst fears. Someone wasn't just observing the ghosts of Ebon Station. They were actively tampering with the cage. I followed the path of the new cables, my maglite cutting a nervous path through the oppressive dark, leading me away from the main concourse and into the station's administrative wing, an area that had been rotting since the 70s. The cables terminated at a heavy steel door marked Chief Engineer. It was locked, but the cheap, modern padlock was no match for a pair of bolt cutters from my tool bag. The room inside was a technological parasite, living in the belly of an ancient beast. The air hummed with the sound of cooling fans. Racks of high-end computer servers blinked with malevolent red and green lights. Multiple laptops were open on a makeshift desk, their screens displaying complex audio mixing software, signal routing matrices, and lines of code. And on a large monitor, a live feed from a dozen hidden cameras throughout the station. My station. This was the nest, Raiden Knox's lair. On the desk, amidst a clutter of energy drink cans and junk food wrappers, was a leather-bound journal. His journal. I flipped it open. It was a manifesto, a terrifying chronicle of obsession. He wrote of the Conductor, of the Midnight Express. He detailed his experiments in amplifying the station's resonant frequencies to strengthen the connection. He saw himself as a pioneer, a new god of a new religion, with Ebon Station as his temple. And then I saw the list. On the last page, under the heading Scheduled Departures, it was a list of names. Caleb Spanner Dunn. His name was crossed out, and below it, the last entry, Marcus Tate, my name, with today's date beside it. My blood ran cold. As I stared at my own name on this psycho's hit list, the power in the room died. The hum of the servers, the glow of the monitors, everything vanished. I was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my heart hammering against my ribs. I thumbed the switch. The powerful beam cut through the blackness, landing on the reinforced glass window that looked out from the office onto the main tracks. And standing there, on the other side of the glass, not 10 feet away, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly gaunt, dressed in the tattered, soot-blackened remains of a 19th century conductor's uniform. Its face was a rusted iron mask, shaped like an old train lantern, with 2 glowing hot coals for eyes. It didn't seem to stand on the ground, but hovered just above it. The conductor. It was real. It was staring directly at me. It raised a single gauntleted hand, its long skeletal fingers pointing right at my heart. The station's POS system, dead just a moment before, crackled to life. But it wasn't Caleb's voice this time. It was a new voice, digitally filtered, layered, and filled with a cold, smug amusement. Raiden Knox's voice. "Welcome, Engineer Tate." The voice echoed through the station, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "You are now officially part of the permanent collection. Please have your ticket ready for departure." The conductor's gaze was a physical weight, a cold, crushing pressure that pinned me in place. Its coal-like eyes burned through the reinforced glass, seeing not just me, but the frantic, panicked pulse hammering in my throat. Raiden's disembodied voice echoed through the station, a triumphant, mocking fanfare for my own damnation. My mind raced, scrambling for an escape, but the office had become a cage, the darkness outside a swirling, predatory ocean. Then the chaos began. Raiden, now playing his infernal instrument with a full orchestra, unleashed everything at once. From multiple tunnels, the mournful, piercing whistles of incoming trains screamed in a discordant symphony. The station bell began to toll, not just 3 times, but in a relentless, maddening peal that shook the very foundations of the station, a frantic summons to the abyss. The temperature in the office plummeted, frost spiderwebbing across the inside of the glass where the conductor stood, its presence warping the very air. I had to move. I couldn't fight the phantom, but I could fight the machine. I turned my back on the terrifying visage in the window and shone my light on the server racks. My goal was simple: destroy the nest. I grabbed the heaviest piece of equipment I could find, a hefty, outdated backup power supply, and hefted it, aiming for the main server. Engineer. Raiden's voice chided through the speakers, dripping with condescending amusement. "Vandalism of company property is strictly forbidden. Besides, I have fail-safes." As if on cue, the steel door I had broken into slammed shut, a heavy internal deadbolt, likely magnetic, thudding into place with grim finality. I was locked in with the ghost in the machine. Or so he thought. My eyes scanned the room frantically. There had to be another way out. The blueprints. I remembered a small maintenance hatch shown in the corner of the office, leading to an old ventilation shaft. It was there behind a stack of dusty, forgotten filing cabinets. The conductor outside the window began to move, not walking, but gliding along the platform, its gaze never leaving me, tracking me as I scrambled towards the hatch. Its movement was accompanied by a low, grinding sound, like immense, rusted gears turning for the first time in a century. As I wrestled with the heavy cabinet, Elisa's name flashed on my phone screen. I answered, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Marcus. Oh God, Marcus. Listen to me." Her voice was a torrent of panicked discovery. I found it. An old newspaper archive from the original boiler explosion in 1893. They interviewed a survivor, a fireman. He talked about the chief engineer, a cruel man named Silas Marner, who refused to sound the evacuation warning. He said, Marner was a devil of a man, a real conductor to hell. The article says Marner's body was never found, just his melted iron watch fob, shaped like a lantern. Silas Marner, the conductor. The name felt dangerous, a key that could unlock the wrong kind of door. Elise, I'm trapped, I grunted, finally shoving the cabinet aside to reveal the rusted, bolted hatch. He's here, the conductor, and the psycho running this whole damn show has me locked in. Don't say the name, Marcus. Don't say the name, Marcus, she warned, her voice tight with fear. The folklore says speaking its true name gives it a claim on you. It forges a link. You become its herald, suddenly. Caleb's voice, a desperate, static-laced whisper, cut through the station's PA system, overriding Raiden's control for a precious second. The vents, Marcus! He can't follow you in the narrow spaces, but he'll send his passengers. Don't listen to their whispers. The warning came just in time. I wrenched the final bolt free and pulled the heavy iron hatch open. The conductor outside shrieked, a sound of tearing metal and escaping steam, and slammed its gauntleted fist against the reinforced glass, which cracked and splintered. It couldn't enter, but its fury was palpable. I squeezed into the ventilation shaft, a dark, claustrophobic tunnel filled with the dust of ages. It was a tight fit, my shoulders scraping against the rusted metal. Behind me, I could hear Raiden's enraged scream of frustration over the PA, followed by a new, horrifying sound, a soft, collective sigh that seemed to come from the very walls of the station. I knew what it was. The passengers. He was sending them after me. I crawled on my hands and knees, my flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the oppressive darkness. The whispers started almost immediately, faint at first, then clearer, slithering through the vents from all directions. He's waiting for you, Marcus. A woman's voice, achingly familiar, whispered from a grate to my left. It sounded like Sarah. My heart seized. Just one little ride. Then the pain stops. A man wheezed from ahead. We have a seat saved for you. Next to her. They were using my grief, my deepest wound, as a weapon. I gritted my teeth, focusing on Caleb's warning, on the cold, hard reality of the rusted metal beneath my palms. They were echoes. They weren't real. The main shaft opened into a larger vertical duct, a precarious ladder leading down into the station's underbelly, the network of service tunnels beneath the tracks. As I descended, I could see them through the grates, the ghostly, shimmering forms of the passengers, gliding through the main concourse, their faces turned towards the vents, their eyes empty, their mouths whispering my name, trying to lure me out. At the bottom, I found myself in a dripping, labyrinthine tunnel. This was my only chance. I had to get to the source, to the boiler room Elise had mentioned, the site of the original disaster, the place where the conductor was born. It was the heart of the station's power, both literally and figuratively. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that's where Raiden would have to be to channel this much energy. I ran, following the thickest bundles of modern cabling. The station above was a symphony of horrors. I could hear the ghost trains arriving one after another, the bell tolling, and above it all, Raiden's voice, no longer taunting, but commanding, narrating the hunt for his audience of one. The subject is now in the service tunnels, attempting to evade the inevitable, he announced, his voice echoing unnaturally. A futile gesture. The Midnight Express is always on schedule. I rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. Blocking the tunnel ahead was not the conductor, but one of its lieutenants. A passenger, a horribly mangled railway worker from the '79 incident, his body a twisted ruin of flesh and faded uniform. He lunged, his spectral hands reaching for me, a silent scream on his distorted face. I didn't have time to think. I remembered the rule. The iron. I swung my heavy pry bar, the one I'd retrieved after the Bell incident. The iron passed through the ghost's form, and the entity shrieked, dissolving like smoke in the wind. The iron was my only weapon, my only shield. Finally, I saw it. A heavy iron door, a plaque above it reading, Boiler Room No. 1. S. Marner, Chief Engineer. The source. I took a deep breath, gripped the pry bar tightly, and pushed the door open, preparing to face the man behind the curtain. The air that billowed out of the boiler room was thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket of coal dust, superheated steam, and an underlying charnel house sweetness. This was the Nexus, the place where the tragedy of 1893 had saturated the very bricks with pain, creating the fertile ground for a monster. And in the center of the cavernous room, amidst the colossal, dormant iron boilers that loomed like sleeping behemoths, was the pulsating, electronic heart of Raiden Knox's operation. He was there, a pale, gangly figure, illuminated by the glow of a dozen monitors. He wasn't cowering or hiding. He was standing with his arms outstretched, head thrown back in ecstasy, basking in the raw spectral energy that swirled visibly in the air around him. Wires and cables snaked from a central server hub, his command console, to the ancient conduits of the station, a parasitic nervous system, head grafted onto the station's corpse. He was conducting the chaos, not with a baton, but with a keyboard and a mixing board, a maestro of a digital science. He turned as I entered, and his face broke into a wide, ecstatic grin. It was the face of a true believer, his eyes dilated, reflecting the flickering data on the screens behind him. "Ah, the guest of honor arrives," he exclaimed, his voice his own now, youthful and jarringly enthusiastic. "Right on schedule. Did you enjoy the welcoming party? I find the passengers add such a wonderful personal touch to the experience." "It's over, kid," I said, my voice a low growl, gripping the iron pry bar so tightly my knuckles were white. "Shut it down," Raiden laughed, a high manic sound that echoed off the iron boilers. "Shut it down. Marcus, you're looking at the dawn of a new era. This isn't a haunting. It's an interactive exhibition, a gateway. I'm not just controlling ghosts. I'm about to monetize the afterlife. And you are my keynote presentation." He gestured to a large screen, which showed a live, thermal imaging view of me and around my figure. A faint, shimmering aura of cold energy was visible. Your grief, your connection to your wife's rail-related tragedy. It makes you a beacon, a 5-star appetizer for the conductor. He's been savoring the prospect of your arrival. As he spoke, he tapped a few keys on his board. The phantom train whistle, the whistle from my nightmares, screamed through the room's speakers. It was sharp, visceral, and it hit me like a physical blow. My knees buckled, the image of Sarah's face, pale and terrified, flashing behind my eyes. The pry bar suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "See? See?" Raiden said, his voice laced with cruel fascination. "I've isolated the exact resonant frequency of your trauma. I can play your pain like a violin." He was trying to incapacitate me psychologically, to break me down for the final offering. I fought against it, focusing on the anger, on the cold fury at this pathetic, power-mad child playing with souls. "You're just a hacker, Raiden. A kid playing with things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he shrieked, his composure cracking, revealing the petulant narcissist beneath. "I am the new station master, the new conductor, and it's time for the final departure." He slammed his hand down on his keyboard. The lights flickered, the air grew ice cold, and the massive iron door to the boiler room groaned shut behind me. From the deepest shadows between the boilers, a form began to coalesce. The conductor, summoned here to its place of birth, its lantern eyes burning with a focused, hungry intensity. It was coming for me. But this time, I wasn't going to run. I was going to sever the signal. The conductor glided forward, its presence sucking all the warmth from the room. Raiden watched, his face alight with triumphant glee, a showrunner watching his season finale. I knew I couldn't fight the entity. Not here, not in the heart of its power. The iron pry bar might hold it off for a second, but it was a stopgap, not a solution. The only way to stop the puppet was to cut the strings. Look at him, Marcus, Raiden yelled over the grinding sound of the approaching phantom. He's beautiful. He is the perfect synthesis of industrial power and mortal terror. He is my masterpiece. My eyes darted from the approaching demon to Raiden's command console. It was a chaotic web of modern tech and ancient iron. Destroying it might work, but it would take too long. Then I saw it. The main power conduit from the server hub didn't go to a modern circuit breaker. It was jury-rigged directly into the primary control panel of the largest central boiler. The very one whose explosion had created the conductor. Raiden wasn't just drawing power from the station. He was feeding the spectral energy back into his systems, creating a ghastly, self-sustaining loop. I had an idea. A terrible, desperate engineer's idea. Instead of charging the conductor, I ran, dodging its grasping, skeletal hand, and vaulted over a low railing, landing beside Raiden's console. He yelped in surprise, fumbling for a taser he had clipped to his belt. "It's over, Raiden," I yelled, my hands flying across the ancient boiler control panel, ignoring his pathetic attempts to stop me. I wasn't trying to shut it down. I was doing the opposite. I slammed the rusted manual bypass levers, wrenched open the primary coolant valves, and with the iron pry bar smashed the main regulator gauge, forcing the system into a critical runaway state. I wasn't just destroying the servers. I was creating a massive, chaotic feedback loop, a tsunami of raw, primordial energy. "What are you doing?" Raiden screamed, his face a mask of horror as he finally understood. "You're overloading the matrix. You'll sever the connection." "I'm feeding the signal back to the source," I roared, as the old boiler began to shudder and groan, a deep, angry hum building within its iron belly. The conductor stopped its advance, turning its head as if confused. The energy it was drawing from the station was now a wild, uncontrolled torrent. The feedback loop I'd created was a siren call of pure, chaotic power, and it was all being channeled through the one person connected to both the station's grid and the entity's consciousness. "Raiden!" He screamed as the energy hit him. The monitors around him exploded in showers of sparks. Blue, spectral lightning arced from the console, wrapping around his body. He convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head. The conductor shrieked, a sound of fury and frustration as its puppet master was torn from its control. The raw energy, its connection to Raiden, now absolute, had to go somewhere. It poured into him, ghostly forms, the faces of the passengers, the mangled railway workers, all the souls trapped in the station, swirled around Raiden, a vortex of spiritual agony. He was lifted from the floor, his body contorting, his fashionable clothes seeming to burn away, replaced by the tattered spectral rags of a bygone era. He had wanted to be the new conductor, and the station, in its own terrible way, was granting his wish. "No, please," he whimpered, his voice now distorted, echoing, as if coming from an old phonograph. The conductor glided to him, not as an attacker, but as a warden. It placed a gauntleted hand on Raiden's shoulder, and the young man's form solidified into a shimmering, ghostly parody of itself. He was promoted. He had become the new ticket taker for the Midnight Express. The conductor turned its lantern gaze to me one last time, a look that was not of anger, but of something ancient and chillingly like respect. Before it and its new screaming acolyte were pulled into a shimmering portal of darkness and vanished. The boiler gave one last, shuddering groan, and the power died for good. plunging the station into a final, absolute silence. I got out. I made an anonymous call to the city, reporting a dangerously unstable structure. I didn't mention ghosts, or hackers, or conductors to hell. Within a month, the entrances to Ebon Station were filled with thousands of tons of concrete, entombed for what I hope is forever. I met Elise for coffee in a bright, crowded cafe far from any train tracks. I told her everything. She listened, her face pale, and when I was done, she told me the true name she had found in the archives. Silas Marner, a name I was glad I never had to speak. Life goes on, or so they say. I'm trying to move on. But last night I was waiting for the last train home at a normal, brightly lit CA station downtown. The platform was nearly empty. As the train pulled in, its familiar, modern electronic whistle sounded. But for a fraction of a second, woven deep within the digital chime, I heard it. A faint, static-laced, echoing voice. Raiden Knox's voice. Now approaching, it whispered, a sound only I could hear elsewhere. I looked at the train's digital destination board. For a split second, it flickered, the name of the next stop dissolving into a single, chilling word. I looked at the handful of tired commuters on the platform with me. None of them had noticed a thing. But I knew. The conductor was dead. But the train is always looking for a new station master. And the Midnight Express now had a much, much wider route. I